I've been spending more time in California lately and I just love it there. Literally every time I'm there, it just feels like that song, I think I like this little life. And I can't wait to get back there to my friends and the community that I've built. I'm hoping to get back in the fall, but every time I visit LA, I've realized I could easily be making some extra money if I just Airbnb my home while I'm away. I always love staying in Airbnbs when I'm away so I can just settle into a good routine, and I'm excited to host people in my home too. Whether you have extra space in your home or you're looking to make some extra money while you travel somewhere fun, your home might be worth more than you think. Find out how much at airbnb.ca/host.
Hey, hi! Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, TIFF Senior International Programmer for Canada, and this is The Other Thing I Do. The festival kicks off this week, and my guest is Amar Wala, a producer, director, and writer whose credits include the breakout documentary The Secret Trial 5 and the CBC Gem series Next Stop, among others. His first dramatic feature, Shook, stars Samar Usmani as Ash, a struggling Toronto writer whose life is thrown for several loops. First when he falls for a downtown barista, and then when he learns his recently estranged father has been diagnosed with Parkinson's. Shook makes its world premiere at TIFF this Saturday, September 7th, at 5:15 p.m. at the Scotiabank One. It's really good, and you should see it. Amar picked The Farewell, Lulu Wang's 2019 dramedy starring Awkwafina as Billy, a struggling artist living in Brooklyn who learns her grandmother has been diagnosed with cancer at home in China, and her larger family is fast-tracking a wedding in Chengchun so they can all get to see Nene one last time without telling her she's dying. And her family doesn't want Billy to come because they're worried she won't be able to keep the secret. Billy flies to China anyway, of course, and then things get really complicated. But also kind of wonderful. This is Someone Else's Movie.
I think it was just a film that was really on my mind for the last few years as I was making my most recent film, which is my scripted feature debut. And I think it just had the kind of life that, you dream about as an independent filmmaker, particularly someone from a racialized community who's hoping to make something specific and hoping it can break past, the industry treating it as some sort of niche little piece because it had such a huge impact. But also it's just a really good movie. I mean, it's rare that movies are universally kind of praised in the way that they are, without playing on, tropes about communities. In fact, I would say it actually breaks apart some things in a way that's really fresh and really original. So it's a dream type of, I don't think it was Lulu Wang's first project, but it's kind of a dream independent film for an up and coming filmmaker, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it. It opened, it played at Sundance and it opened in the summer in Toronto, and it was just blindsided me. I knew I had seen Awkwafina in a bunch of stuff, but I only knew her as a comedian. I didn't know she had the range to pull this off, and it sounded like it was going to be a big, broad comedy in the original pitch, and it's so not that. It's just delicate and tender, and this whole... I always get lost in this part. There's something about it that captures this vibe that I've been seeing in movies in the last 5 or 10 years. And I'm sure it's always been there because it's a basic human narrative, but it's just about how children are hostages to their parents and their parents' decisions. And it happens in Shook too, right? So much of who Billy is in The Farewell is dependent on her family's decision to emigrate and to come to America when she was 4 and didn't have any say in the matter. She's never known her homeland. She's been back a couple of times, but she's never felt like she belongs there. And this thing now, the diagnosis of her grandmother, if Nai goes, that's her severing of, that's the end of her connection to China. And it's never spelled out. There's no monologue about it. And so many other films would have gone there, like some big climax where it suddenly all becomes about Billy, but it never does. And the sensitivity to that, and then gradually me realizing while I'm watching the movie that of course she wouldn't have a monologue. She doesn't understand any of this is happening, right? She's just reacting in the moment to what's in front of her because that's who Billy is. But we're allowed to see it. We're allowed to see that world and breathe it. In the same way, I think you do a similar thing with Shook, with Ash being a spectator to his own life in some scenes when these decisions are happening around him and for him, but he doesn't get to participate in anything until the very end of the film.
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting thing that happens when you're the child of immigrants, or you immigrated yourself as a child. Usually your parents don't really have the language to deal with sort of structural problems in the way you will once you come of age. So it becomes a very difficult thing to talk about with your own family, because that understanding that you have the privilege of getting because you grew up in the West isn't quite there for your parents. So they may be facing very similar barriers, in many cases, much harsher barriers, but they don't know how to deal with it in the same way you know how to deal with it, because of the privilege of time, right? Of growing up in the place and having access to the language and to the literature about this kind of stuff. And obviously the farewell doesn't talk about that directly, but it's very clearly present in Billy's relationship with her parents. And I think it's to a certain extent present for me with Shook, with Ash and his parents. And I think the two characters are in very similar places in their lives, which is that, they're in that spot where you're supposed to be carving out your own path in life. You're supposed to be, this is the thing that when you're a young, artistic or talented person, you've been waiting for your whole life, right? Is this moment where you get to be the grown up and everyone gets to see how awesome you are at your thing. And I think in the farewell, it is alluded to that Billy is an artist or trying to be an artist of some kind, or in grad school of some kind, but that's kept at a distance. And I found that to be super powerful. And I wonder if it's something that people asked the director about. Hey, do you want to bring, what does Billy do? Do you want to bring that to the forefront a bit more? Because I certainly know it was something I was asked about a lot with Shook. But the truth is, when you are in that place in your life, particularly when you're dealing with, the uncertainty of how to build a career, the uncertainty of how to navigate a city as a kind of young adult, or I would say, firmly an adult, but someone who still hasn't quite figured their stuff out. When a family issue takes hold, that almost becomes a distraction or an excuse from, hey, okay, I can dive into this now. And that makes it okay that I'm not so focused on my career that I don't know the next step. And so I thought the way Lulu dealt with that was so tender and so smart, but yet so honest, because that is the way it felt for me too. And so the film was just, I was blown away by the balance she was able to find between, never dipping over into melodrama, yet not being afraid of being tender, right? And that's a very difficult balance to find as a writer director. And it was something that was a huge inspiration for us as we wrote Shook.
Yeah, it's a needle that every film has to thread its own way, especially if you're dealing with something that starts with a ticking clock, like the looming tragedy here of a sick grandparent. But the film, she puts us in Billy's head so quickly and so elegantly, because the movie is as distractible as Billy is, where she's constantly stumbling over barriers that are external, like they're not her. Like, Billy is not the problem. She's treated as the problem by her parents, which I find really fascinating too. Oh, you're too Western. If you'll blurt things out. We can't have that. So they're silencing her preemptively before she gets there. They won't tell her. They'll tell her what's wrong, but they won't allow her to connect to her grandmother about it, which is so weirdly, the emotional logic of it is airtight. Of course, it makes perfect sense because they're trying to protect this old woman from a horrible truth, but they're putting all the weight of it on their kid, who is obviously they're right. Like, she can't handle it. Billy is not trained for this at all. She doesn't have the cultural language to navigate it once they finally get there. And when they're in Chengchun, she's lost because she almost speaks the language, but she doesn't really. And so it's a brilliant expositional device, because she knows all this stuff, but she has to have it explained to her over and over anyway, which allows people on the outside of the movie to understand it. We can understand what's going on. At the same time, we get to understand how shut out Billy feels by not being 100% in on every conversation. And I was I gotta say, that one scene in the ER where she meets the handsome doctor, I was terrified for the first time, like an hour into this movie. It's like, they're not gonna, no, that's a terrible idea. And it's not a meet cute. We never see him again. It's just a thing that happens, and then they blow past it, because that's the only way that could work. If it derails into a romance, and we've seen other movies like that, that it's just like, this is not what this story is about. It's about these two people at opposite ends of life understanding each other and reconnecting, and it's not about a love story. I mean, it is a love story, but it's not that kind of love story. And the fact that like Billy wouldn't be receptive. So there's this one moment, and I've talked to a couple of other people about it, and we all experience the same thing, which is like, don't do this, don't go there, that's wrong. And I'd love to talk to Lulu Wang about it someday, to find out if that's a gamble, if that's something that she wanted to do to show the audience she knows exactly what she's doing. Like, here is a false start that we are not going to take, because Billy has no time for it. The family doesn't care. They would probably like this hookup to happen because he's a nice doctor and he's quite handsome. But that's not what this movie is about. It is absolutely a distraction. And I think it's the first time in the movie that Billy is competent, because she doesn't let herself get distracted. And it's there to distract us as much as her, and we fall for it and she doesn't.
Yeah, it's really true. I mean, I feel like it was a bit of I would love to talk to Lulu Wang about it one day too, but I feel like it was a bit of a wink, wink, her having fun with us a little bit, making us think, maybe I will go here. Nope, it's not that movie. So, it was really well done. And it kind of, that scene is a great example, because it's kind of the epitome of the balance she found between, it's funny when you're a filmmaker and when you make something that's got serious tones but is also kind of light and funny, inevitably everyone's always asking you, well, what's the genre of this movie? Is it a comedy? Is it a drama? What is it? And I don't know, as a filmmaker, you never really try to define it in that way. I mean, you have to at a certain point for, marketing reasons or whatever it is. But whenever people would ask me, well, what exactly is the genre of Shook? I would just point to films like The Farewell that are, I think, dramas, but are really warm and tender and funny. And that is incredibly difficult to do. There's so many films and TV shows that try it or can sustain it for a short period of time, but kind of lose it at certain points. And I don't think this film ever really loses its sense of itself. It knows exactly what it is. The hand of the filmmaker is so steady and so confident. And that scene is a great example of, I could take you here, and this is a real scenario that could happen. But here's a way that it'll play out that works for me, that feels like it's part of the world of the film, yet feels totally like fun and special, and that it's letting you into something that the filmmaker is trying to do. So yeah, it's a beautiful scene in a beautiful film. And there's, I guess, the other things about it, about why I chose the film, is that it's just so beautifully crafted, right? It's just such a high level of craft. And I think that that's something that when we talk about films that are cultural or culturally specific in some way, I will say this as a racialized filmmaker, that's the thing you never get to talk about, is craft, right? Because it's always focused in on the differences and the cultural nuances and what makes this so exotic and fun and new. And I think this film kind of just blows past all of that stuff right away. It just never gives you the chance to do it, because it demands that you take the craft seriously, the cinematography, the pacing, the beautiful score, like all of it is just so top notch. And I think that I think all filmmakers feel that pressure, but particularly when you're an up and coming filmmaker of color, that focus on craft is so difficult. And it's something that's going to put so much pressure on you. And the way it's dealt with in The Farewell is just so, incredibly inspiring and confident.
I wonder if it isn't also part of the genesis of the thing, because it's based on a radio story she produced for this, or she appeared in for This American Life, and she lived a version of this, and maybe that's it. Like, having experienced it, you just aren't interested in making a pretty version. Like, there's the exoticism is all experienced by Billy for us, so it's not. The film doesn't have to bother with that either. It's it's about isolation, and it's not about cultural isolation, although it is also about that. It's about like everybody. I've never experienced anything like this, but I have been the only person in my family who has a different opinion on something, right? Like all of that stuff is so universal and instantly recognizable. And then you get someone like Awkwafina, who is just as contemporary and unpredictable an actor as they come. And even though it's scripted and she clearly is working in collaboration with Wang, and it's not, I don't think there's anything that's improvised in the movie ultimately, but she feels like a live wire within this movie because she doesn't belong in this situation. And so that's where our focus goes, right? And the entire film is built around supporting her and making her, like placing her at the center of the frame almost every single time. And if she's not, there's a reason. And that intentionality comes through to us. And so you can, the craft of it is the structure is the narrative, and the mise en scène all works to underscore the emotional impact. Yeah, there's never a moment. I think about the other Awkwafina film recently was Crazy Rich Asians, which just stops in that food market and just takes 10 minutes to talk about food. So Constance Wu's character can learn about exoticism, which struck me as like, I get it. It's part of the whole thing of that movie is to show you how amazing everything is and basically act as a tourist board ad. The Farewell's just not interested in that stuff. We're lost there. And it doesn't matter if something is really pretty or if something is aiming for a tourist attraction down the line. Billy is the person we're following there, and she doesn't want to be around it. She's not interested in, and in the end, I mean, when she volunteers to stay for a little while longer, it's a really beautiful moment, but it's got nothing to do with, boy, I've seen some sights, right? Like it's about the emotion. It's about what she's willing to do for her grandmother.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something really subversive and brilliant about the sort of flipping of the power dynamic between her and her family. Because, generally when you're the family that lives in the West, or you're the kid that grew up in the West, there's a certain privilege you might have over family members that perhaps stayed behind in your family's country of origin. But at no point does Billy ever feel superior. And at no point do they ever, for a second, does the family ever give her a chance to feel like her point of view on this is the right one, because she's got some sort of like, Western worldview that's more modern or more civilized. Because her kind of friction with this idea of her family not telling the grandmother about the illness is based on a very specific Western worldview, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's never given credence by the director. Like the script and the performances never for a second make the Asian family feel like, hey, maybe we're wrong. They're like, no, kid, don't go there, right? Like, this is our thing, learn from us. And that's a really wonderful power flip, because, again, normally it'd be that the kid who grew up in America has all of this wonderful, cool stuff to teach all the family back home, right? And it's not like that at all. It's this brilliant subversive power flip that the script does. So.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about that in the review at the time. It's like there is an absolute nightmare version of this where Billy gets pulled into a wacky plot, like slipping pills and dumplings and things. And it's just, that would have, again, I don't want to presume that there's a version of that would not work. It could be done, especially with Awkwafina, who could actually handle that sort of chaos and emotionality. But it's just not that sort of movie. And that was how I was selling it all summer that year. It's just like, no, you don't understand. Whatever you think this movie is, it's deeper and richer than the one sheet, than the poster, than any of it. And it just isn't afraid of that. Like that's the other thing about The Farewell. So many films of this nature are really unwilling to sit with the weight of it, with the thing that you're doing that is for a good cause but will break you personally. And there's those two scenes, one with her father and one with her uncle, where they both say, like, I have problems with this as well, but it's how I get to spend time with my mom. before she goes, and how culturally everyone is struggling with something, with some part of it, but they're all doing it. And I was trying to figure out the last time I watched it, is this about duty or is this about love? Because those are two different things, which again is an issue that comes up a lot in Shook, where Ash's conflict with even seeing his father is rooted in pain over his parents' divorce. But it's something that even as an adult he was protected from and still doesn't fully understand. And my parents divorced when I was 10, and for years I had an unacknowledged tension that's always there, because you don't know what happened. As you get older, you understand just how little you understand about your parents. And that's something that Shook really captures. Farewell doesn't involve itself in it that much, but when you, as you said, you add the additional level of cultural disconnect between a protagonist who is Western in and out and Westernized, and parents who are acting along rules that, American and Canadian education tells us are backwards. They're not. They're just different. But the lens through which our media and our history in the North American countries has seen anybody who is another seeps into your kids as well. Like seeps into the kids who are born and raised here or were raised here, and that's another hurdle to overcome. And we see it playing out in Shook in a very different way than it does in The Farewell, but they're both about people just ultimately trying to understand that their mechanisms, the installed mechanisms from the parents and from the culture, are arguing with each other, and they're arguing inside of you. And how do you reconcile that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I think about The Farewell, when I think about the pressure of taking a story that's that personal and dramatizing it as an American film, and which is mostly in Mandarin, for what will ultimately, hopefully be an international audience, but you're launching it at Sundance. You talked about the bad version of this film. The bad version of this film makes me really, really nervous to think about. Look, there could have been hey, look how weird my family and these customs are kind of version of this film, right? And that would have been really awful. And so again, it speaks to sort of like, I think the heart with which Lulu Wang approached this, which is like a genuine love for her family. And I think, it's funny, I don't even think, when I think about the movie, I don't think that much about the plot device of her grandmother having an illness and the family not saying anything to her in order to keep her in the dark. Because to me, that I understand that that's a very interesting plot device in order to sell the film, right? Like,
yeah,
it was probably used in all of their written materials in order to pitch the film and get it financed and all of that. But really, that is so inconsequential to the overall family dynamics and the heart and the depth of the film that it gave me a lot of confidence in someone. I think the film came out in 2019, and we were, my co-writer Adnan Khan and I were probably on draft 2 of Shook at that point. And Shook is, again, a very personal film, deals with family illness. But I think that when The Farewell came out, it gave me so much confidence that you can tell a film that's got some cultural specificity to it and have it be personal, and it can have a large audience and a large sort of life, which is like something we all dream about and hope for, but it happens so rarely in independent film. So it was just, cool to see a film of this nature and of this size kind of achieve what The Farewell achieved. It kind of lets you dream a bit bigger. But the other part of it was seeing a filmmaker take something that's personal, take something that's culturally specific, and never exoticize her own family or her own culture, and never give you a chance to do that as an audience member. Again, it's just, I keep coming back to the word steady. It's such a steady-handed film. And that was really inspiring when we were writing. And it really gave me the confidence to see, like, no, we can go all in here. We can do this the way we want to without feeling the need to make things easier for specific audiences, namely North American and white audiences.
Hey, Hey, it's Norm interrupting my own show to bring you up to speed on Shiny Things, my newsletter about physical media, culture, and the odd streaming project. Last week I wrote about The Watchers, the first feature from Ishana Night Shyamalan, daughter of M, and Arrow Video's new box set of Robert Rodriguez Mariachi trilogy. Sign up for a 14-day free trial at shiny-things.ghost.io or find a link at the Semcast Blue Sky account. You like reading about movies? I like writing about them. Come check it out.
I've been spending more time in California lately, and I just love it there. Literally every time I'm there, it just feels like that song, I think I like this little life. And I can't wait to get back there to my friends and the community that I've built. I'm hoping to get back in the fall, but every time I visit LA, I've realized I could easily be making some extra money if I just Airbnb my home while I'm away. I always love staying in Airbnbs when I'm away so I can just settle into a good routine, and I'm excited to host people in my home too. Whether you have extra space in your home or you're looking to make some extra money while you travel somewhere fun, your home might be worth more than you think. Find out how much at airbnb.ca/host.
Previous examples of this sort of movie were the ones that I was thinking of, the ones that I used when I wrote the review, basically, were Olivier Assayas's Summer Hours and Edward Yang's Yi Yi. And very obviously, one of those got a lot more play in North America than the other.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, one of them is 3 hours long, but the Yi film's a masterpiece. It was his last film. It's survived and endured in the West because of Criterion, more or less. But Summer Hours got picked up by IFC and it played right out of Cannes. It played all over North America. It's in French, but it's got subtitles and everybody can sort of see them. So like everybody, quote unquote, can see themselves in it. But it's remarkable that both of those films should be about, I mean, they're circle of life movies, and it's about younger generations dealing with the problems that their older parents' generations created. But they don't have the element of conflict that The Farewell has, which I think is what makes it an easier sell to a mass audience, not just because it's half of it or three-quarters of it is in Mandarin, but the conflict is based in parents asking their children to do something that the children don't want to do. Mm-hmm. And it's not just Billy, right? Like Hao has to get married.
Yeah.
To a woman that he probably doesn't want to marry, but everybody gets roped into this. It's not just one person's life being compromised by this farce. But it's not a farce because they care, because there's something meaningful at the heart of it. So, yeah, there's the East versus West conflict. There's the personal conflict. There's the larger thing, the looming tragedy of not getting to say goodbye to Nai. Mm-hmm. Nene, I keep doing that. Which is the thing that Awkwafina manages to wear on her face in every scene, like that grimace of not being able to speak, and she looks like she's choking on her own tongue sometimes, or she wants to say something and won't. But it's about what we owe to our families, and that's beautiful. Like, in a really weird way, you're watching someone go through what is probably the worst week of her adult life, but she comes through it the other side and she finally gets to shout. She finally gets to be herself. And it doesn't matter that the Guggenheim passed on her fellowship. We never really find out what it is she writes either. She's just defined as a writer. But I think that's the point of the film. She'll write about this.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, at that point in your life, the writing and your career are so distant, right? They feel like so far away, even though, they may not be. It feels like this thing that's just out of reach. And so the family thing becomes it becomes the thing you can dive into and really kind of emotionally grapple with fully. And I think the other thing that the film does really well is, again, like sometimes when we make these personal films, it's always about like, well, if something wasn't really based on my real life, if something didn't happen to me really, and I wasn't dramatizing it, would this be believable or not? And the film does not seem concerned about that too much. You know what I mean? It doesn't hinge on the fact that this really happened to Lulu Wang and she really lived a version of it. That adds something and it's powerful, but it's not the thing that makes the film work. And it's not that it wouldn't work if that weren't true. Right. And that's a real pressure you feel when you're writing something that's personal or based on your own life. And I can give an example from Shook, which is that, it's hopefully when people see the film, this isn't too much of a spoiler, but the there is a character who's sort of a best friend who's a doctor in the film. And it would be kind of like a weird coincidence that like your dad was diagnosed with an illness and you had a friend who just happened to be working in that field, but that really happened to me, right? And so I felt this like weird sense of relief that, hey, like this isn't that far-fetched because it really happened to me, and I had that answer in my back pocket if anyone were to ever question that. But Wang's so confident, like I don't feel that in the film at all. I don't feel that need to explain, hey, this is based on something real, remember. And I guess as a filmmaker, I think about that a lot because I've made other dramatic films based on real stories, often about issues of justice. And my short films when I was in film school were based on true stories. And they were, crazy stories about the Muslim community in Toronto after 9/11 and things like that. And obviously those stories are quite big and quite dramatic. And you need, I wouldn't use the word crutch necessarily, but you do need to explain to the audience that this really happened in order for it to be believable sometimes, right? Well, that's much harder to do with a personal film, right? You can do that with a big national story about justice or the criminal justice system or whatever it is. But when it's something small and something internal to your family, you constantly feel the need to justify these story points. But Wang never goes there. She has complete confidence in what she's doing and in the story being just a story on its own, which is, again, really amazing for someone who is at that point of their career to have that level of steadiness, right?
Yeah. Well, and as you pointed, it's not her first film, but it is her breakout. Her posthumous is, there's a reason nobody talks about it. It's fine, but it doesn't have the spark that this has. It doesn't have the life, the sense that you're just watching people exist with one another and argue about things that are genuinely important. We do feel, and I think it's because Billy is set up as an eavesdropper as well, where people don't pay that much attention to her because they don't think she speaks the language. She doesn't speak it well, but she understands it. And that's also something, that's a conflict that all children of immigrants, I never actually, I think I'm third generation, but like Lithuanian and Ukrainian, my parents both spoke Yiddish when they thought we couldn't understand it. And it's like my brother and I kind of picked up a little bit of it, just enough to know, like, you get the keywords, you get the gist, and then, these people better than almost anybody else, and you can see tone and attitude. So she's an eavesdropper the same way we are, which is that, the way the film camera just offers you more insight into performance and emotion just by making everything so big. And again, we're always on her side, even though we're constantly being told she's the wild card in the film. Like we don't believe that. She's doing everything right, except of course that she's doing it right from our perspective, which is then what's confronted. And I think that's the thing that Wang got in the second film that she doesn't get in her first, just understanding how to break through the screen and make the audience complicit, like to make us identify with Billy, even if we've never had an experience resembling it at all what she's going through. But she manages to turn the camera as much on us as it is on her in the second half. And we're reevaluating our opinions the same way she's reevaluating her ideas.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a fluidity, I try to think through how, Awkwafina, obviously, we had not seen her in something like this or in a role like this before. And this happens often with, actors and their indie breakouts, like you see a side of them that you hadn't seen before. And I really think that it was a beautiful collaboration between her and Lulu, because the way the film is shot, I think what you're responding to with Awkwafina's kind of fluidity and despite the fact that the film is so formalistic in the way it's shot, it's not a lot of handheld. Everything is very framed and very beautiful and very smooth. I keep thinking about the scenes where Awkwafina and her grandmother are, doing Tai Chi out in the back alleys and how they leave frame and re-enter frame. And that's breaking all of these formalistic rules that you think are followed throughout this film. But it's those moments where it's a oneer and it's simply a locked off camera that adds so much to the performance and to the kind of chemistry between grandma and granddaughter. And I think that there's such interesting, bold choices the film has all of these perfectly centered frames. I'm thinking of the first time Grandma turns around and Billy has entered the apartment. It's this perfect medium shot, a little punch in on Grandma as she sees Billy, versus the stuff I was just describing, where there's a couple of seconds where nobody's on frame anymore.
Yeah.
Everyone's gone, and then they suddenly show back up, right? So, and it's a reminder that all of this stuff can work together when you're a filmmaker. You don't have to stick with any one thing. You don't have to have these hard rules. So,
Yeah. Well, it's the old, what is it? I think it was the Altman line where he wants you to feel like any one of these characters can just leave the room and have their own movie going on. We just don't see it. There's all this busyness. Like there's waiters coming and dishes being cleared and constant commotion in the restaurant scenes. And then even when people are sitting still, they're fussing about tea and they're making sure everybody has something to do. And it doesn't feel like business. It just feels like life. It feels like we're sat in the middle with them. And yeah, the framing device, the device of the framing, as you were saying, is the very intentional compositions that then just get disrupted because there's too much going on and things are out of control. And sometimes people don't want to be there and they kind of start edging towards the edge of the sides of the frame. Like it's just beautifully put together, but the bustle, the life, it's such an obvious transition from the shots in Brooklyn where Billy's by herself on the street and there's nothing else happening. And then by the end of it, when you bring it back to her conversations over FaceTime or Skype or whatever it is, there is this sense that those frames on their phones are not holding their lives in, that there's so much else going on outside that we just aren't privy to, but it's all there. Like the film is alive with potential in a way that it wasn't in the beginning. And whether you can, like whether you argue that it's Billy's new outlook, that she's just seeing more of the world, which will help her as a writer, or if it's just about the world seeming more alive when you are participating in it, like they're both totally valid aesthetic choices. But it also is something that 5 years ago I didn't think of at all. It's just, oh, that's the perfect shot, that's the perfect ending. Like you just don't think about how precious this construction is and how important everything clearly is to Wang to deliver the film that she's made.
Yeah, now that you're talking about it, I'm thinking about, early in the film, seeing Grandma on the phone and sort of like this very sort of like boxed in version of her. Mm-hmm. And then being in her world on her turf for so long in her apartment that she runs, where she's clearly the boss and everyone's doing, you get instructed to do something and you're going to do it. And also her social kind of like charisma within her own community, the outside world. It turns out that Nene's world is so big, right? And then at the end of the film, when Billy's back in New York and she's communicating with her family back in China, you see it totally differently, right? Yeah. Now it's like, it's because the film starts off with that. I think Billy has a bit of this sort of sense of privilege where she's like, oh, I'm going to protect my grandmother who's old and has trouble and is weak and is not being treated fairly by my other family members. And that dynamic gets flipped so beautifully and so thoroughly by the end of the film in a way that's still really beautiful and in a way that unexpectedly gives hope to Billy, right? And that's another thing about films like this is like when I think having been through this, the last thing you want to do is make a film about your family and about difficult things your family's gone through and have it be a slog and have it feel like at the end of it that things are just going to be really tough forever. And whether it's real or not, or whether you honestly felt that way or not at that point in your life, you want the audience to walk out feeling like they've seen something that is now a part of them and that they can take with them moving forward. And that's hopeful, right? Doesn't mean it has to be happy. But great movies just do that thing to you where you walk out of the cinema, no matter how good or bad or dark or light the ending was, when you walk out of the cinema and you've just seen something awesome and you're going to see it again and it's going to be really awesome, if not better the second time. That's what the farewell does. And I think that that's what filmmakers we dream of doing, right? Of making films like that.
Yeah, I love that feeling. And again, it's that moment where the first time through, you spend your entire experience holding back just a tiny bit of yourself because what if they screw it up? Like, what if it goes wrong? And there's a handful of movies where it's just like, this is the perfect ending. Please cut, please cut, please cut. And then it does. And you get this rush, like your investment has been rewarded or whatever, emotionally, whatever you want to call it. At least that's how it always plays for me. And then the second time through, it's even richer because I don't have to worry. I can relax into the experience knowing they're going to stick the landing.
Yeah, I mean, great films are always better on future viewings, right? Just because there's so many little things that, well, A, you can just only process so much and catch so much the first time through.
Sure.
But great movies, like for me, great movies I've always had that feeling of, I can't wait to do this again, right? I can't wait to sit through this again and really like force my eyes open and catch every little thing. And I think you can't plan to make a movie like that. You know what I mean? You can't plan to make a movie that's going to be just as rich, if not richer, on second viewing. You've just got to make the movie the best you think you can make it. And sometimes, I think most of the time, it's because the filmmakers captured something really special. It'll just do that for most of the audience. But I rewatched The Farewell. I've probably watched it 4 times now since it came out, so I don't watch it all the time. It's been out for probably 5 years now, and I probably give it a once a year kind of viewing. And I don't know that I'm picking up new things anymore, but I know I'm still leaving with that same feeling every time, right? And that to me is, as a filmmaker, the dream, to make a film that's like that one day. And I know it's not something I can plan for, and I know it's highly unlikely, but it is, I think, the best gift you can leave your audience is a film that they're going to watch 10 years later, and they're still going to get that same rush and that same feeling of beauty and warmth that they got the first time they watched it.
Yeah, well, you know this. I'm very excited to see how audiences receive Shook at the festival. And honestly, this is the best part of the job. Just like looking forward to something and then getting it in front of an audience and feeling it and experiencing it with them as they feed it back to the filmmaker and the cast and crew and the Q&A. If I'd known this was a thing that I could do, I would have been doing it since my 20s. It's just, I've never had an experience like this since I started, or before I started the festival, and it's been wonderful. But as far as Shook goes, you are dealing with a lot of the same building blocks as The Farewell. I don't think they're not the same movie in any way, but they are about people confronting, as we've discussed, they're about people confronting their illusions about their parents and their illusions about themselves and their cultural disconnect and everything else. So the way out on the podcast is always the same, which is there anything of The Farewell that you borrowed or lifted or outright stole? We've sort of touched on it, but is there one thing that you sort of, now looking back, feel that you leaned on the most?
I mean, I think there were a lot of little things. I mean, like I've talked about before, I think the biggest thing it did is just gave us confidence that movies like this work. The thing, you hear stories about this throughout the history of making films in Hollywood, but I think internationally too, of, when you are a filmmaker, when you're an up and comer, or when you're doing something that seems really simple, but is kind of different than most things out there, you have to kind of present models to the industry, right? You have to be able to say, I keep thinking about like Matt Damon and Ben Affleck when they were told, oh, why do you want to act in Good Will Hunting, pointing out Rocky, right? Obviously, right. Completely different films, but it seems silly. It seems kind of trivial. But having someone that has done it before, that has shown the path, makes your life so much easier. Even now, when I talk to PR people who are repping the movie and things like that, if I mention The Farewell, something clicks for them, right? Something clicks. They've seen it before, right? And so I think Lulu Wang just kind of gave us a gift in that it created a pathway forward for a film like Shook. And like you said, they're very different movies, but there are certain things that are similar, and telling a personal story that's rooted in your own life. But I think what I wanted to do, and what I think The Farewell accomplished, that I hope we accomplished with Shook, was take something that's really specific, that's hyper specific, that's culturally specific to your family, and have that specificity almost lead to something that feels universal, right? And so that's the hope, and that's the dream, and I guess the audience will decide. But I'm just really grateful for that film existing, because it gave me a pathway forward and gave me confidence that I might not have otherwise had. So
Yeah. The thing that I think about when I'm putting the two against each other in my head is that Ash is the guide to both realities, like to both Scarborough and downtown. He's the one who knows everything and everywhere to go and what to do and how to do it right up until he doesn't. And the moment he loses his balance, the whole film becomes a whirlwind for him emotionally. Like visually, it's very stable, except for the night bus scene. But the movie is so carefully composed around a carefully composed person who has segmented and sectioned himself off in a way that Billy doesn't even understand she could do, because she is only, like, that's the whole point of her. She has one gear the whole time, which is how you get tricked into, oh, Awkwafina's going to do a comedic performance. It's like, no, you're watching her recalibrate herself over and over and over again in this new surroundings. Ash has already done the calibrations, but we're watching him find the limits of them, which I find really, really interesting in terms of a journey emotionally through the story that he's experiencing. It's all about using sort of like, I keep thinking about it like a trapeze act, where if you aren't braced, you'll miss. He's braced all the time for this thing that he's like, it's an unconscious thing. He doesn't even think about it anymore. But the second he has to think about it, it's like forgetting how to walk. And suddenly all those pieces, in the same way that his father is starting with the tremors of Parkinson's, he is experiencing this tectonic shift in how he perceives himself. And like in a weird way, I think we're watching Ash's book about this experience in the, like, it's the same thing. It is the ending of The Farewell. By the end of the movie, like, this is the story you're going to tell.
Yeah, I mean, I think so much of that is because of Samar Osmani, who plays the lead's performance. And I think his performance is in some ways kind of what I thought Ash would be, but in other ways just so different than Ash was on the page.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, I can't wait for people to see his performance. And I really hope they talk about it or see it in the same way that you've been describing Awkwafina's performance, in that, you know, Samar he's sort of recognizable. People will see him in Succession and Inventing Anna and Three Body Problem, but he's always playing, you know, that very sturdy, handsome type of guy. And there's a little bit of that in Shook, but this is a really different type of approach. And I was surprised pleasantly by the approach he took to Ash. And I really hope people are moved by his performance the way we were when we were making the film.
Well, I'm excited to find out. I'm really happy to put this in front of people. And yeah, I'm starting to talk like a promoter now, but honestly, yeah, what the hell? I'm in your corner. I like the movie. Let's do it.
Thank you. Well, thanks for all your support. And yeah, thanks for letting us chat about The Farewell. It's a beautiful movie and very easy movie to talk about.
You've been to enough festivals. Is there, like, have you run into Lulu Wang? Have you ever actually gotten to meet her? I've missed her. We've been in the same room like 4 times, but I've never actually spoken to her.
No. And I mean, it would be obviously a dream come true. And maybe one day it'll happen. I mean, this is the thing about TIFF is, like, you know, you grow up in the city. After a while, TIFF is just this yearly thing that happens. But like this year is different for me, obviously, because I've got a feature in the festival. And this morning it hit me that, oh, I've got a movie in a festival, and that same festival is playing a Francis Ford Coppola movie, same year as me. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, that's kind of weird. That's what TIFF can do for you. And it just hit me today. I was like, wait, what? Oh, geez, that. So who knows? I'm hopeful, but no, I haven't had a chance to meet her yet. Yeah.
Well, if it happens, I want to be there. That's all. I'll see what I can do.
That sounds good.
My thanks to Amar Wala, whose first dramatic feature, Shook, has its world premiere at TIFF this Saturday, September 7th at 5:15 p.m. at the Scotiabank 1. If you can't make that screening, there's a second show at 5:15 p.m. Monday, September 9th at the Scotiabank 3. You can find Amar on Instagram at Moviewala, Moviewala, and you can find The Farewell on Blu-ray from VVS Films in Canada and Lionsgate in the US. It's also streaming on Tubi, Gem, and Plex in Canada, and on Max and Canopy in the US, and available to rent or buy on various VOD services across North America. You can find me on Blue Sky at Norm Wilner, and you can find this podcast there at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. The first year of the show is still available for just $20 at payhip.com/Semcast. That's the first 52 episodes of Someone Else's Movie, 44 of which aren't currently available anywhere else. And check out my newsletter, Shiny Things, at shiny-things.ghost.io. I think you'll enjoy it. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it, or the show in general, please say so. leave a review wherever you've been listening. Every little bit helps. It truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network while you're doing that. Stay safe, watch movies, wear a mask if you go out, get the new booster when you can. I'll see you down at TIFF.
I've been spending more time in California lately, and I just love it there. Literally every time I'm there, it just feels like that song, I think I like this little life. And I can't wait to get back there to my friends and the community that I've built. I'm hoping to get back in the fall, but every time I visit LA, I've realized I could easily be making some extra money if I just Airbnb my home while I'm away. I always love staying in Airbnbs when I'm away so I can just settle into a good routine, and I'm excited to host people in my home too. Whether you have extra space in your home or you're looking to make some extra money while you travel somewhere fun, your home might be worth more than you think. Find out how much at airbnb.ca/host.